Hello everyone, my name is Kosienka. I'm the international trainer of the Integrative Systemic Coaching method, and I have been asked to tell you something about the history of the method and how it developed. For me, IC is profound and very efficient psychology, and it has even deeper roots in ancient Hawaii. To understand why, we'll take a short look into Hawaiian history. Hawaiian Islands are the most isolated archipelago in the world. They are in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, some 3,000 kilometers away from the nearest continent. So imagine some 1,000 years ago or so, the first people discovered Hawaii. They have traveled from somewhere around Tahiti, which is in the middle of the South Pacific, more than 4,000 kilometers away. There was only limited plant and animal life on the islands then, whatever survived after being carried by the sea or wind for thousands of kilometers. After discovering the new islands, the Polynesians initially made regular trips back to their homeland to bring back with them the plants and animals they needed. But once they had everything they needed, they more or less said, well, Tahiti, that was it. We need some space. So for centuries they lived very isolated in small communities that were more like large extended families. Unlike people in most other parts of Earth, they also lived mostly in the open. There weren't any dangerous animals, not even mosquitoes. The climate was perfect, and the only time they actually needed a shelter would be when it would rain. Because everybody was there in the open, the wise people of the village, the healers and shamans called kahuna in Hawaiian, had a lot of chances to observe family interactions, how people treat each other, how adults treat children, and what happens next. Slowly, they made a connection between relationships and people's emotional and physical well-being. Perhaps through generations, that insight was expanded and deepened. As kahunas were also the healers, they would naturally experiment and include their insights into their practice. Eventually, they developed a process that became the first step and the essence of healing chronic health issues. They would start with presuming that the cause of a long-term bodily problem is in the person's relationships. In order to heal that, they would invite the whole family together, which often meant not only the whole village but also relatives from other villages. And they would start a process of resolving any quarrels, resentments, or grievances that had accumulated within the extended family. The kahunas would encourage the family members to reconcile, but if necessary, they would also be mediators or even judges. If somebody broke another person's canoe, the kahuna could order that person to make a new one. If somebody stole another person's crops, they would be ordered to replace them, and so on, usually very practical restitution. Such a process could last a day or two or more until everything was resolved and everybody felt things were in balance. The kahunas named this process ho'oponopono. Some of us in the West are familiar with that term, but usually not in its true, deepest, and richest sense. Ho'opono means to create justice. In Hawaiian, every word that is repeated means it's intensified and amplified. So ho'oponopono means something like creating pure or intense justice. This process inspired the method we learn in Module 1 of our training. For certain types of clients or situations, Hawaiian kahunas in old times also developed methods we could call working with the symbolic mind and metaphorical images. This is what a lot of our Module 3 is based on. Hawaiians would have called it magic, but we don't have to. Many things in the world seem magical until you understand how they work. That, by the way, doesn't necessarily make them less wonderful. Old-time Hawaiians didn't know anything about modern psychology, and yet their kahunas developed a model of 3 parts of the human mind that is nicely compatible with our concept of conscious mind, subconscious mind, and what Freud would have called superego. So maybe Freud was less like the father and more like a kahuna of modern psychology. Somewhere in the 1980s, a British-Canadian man came to Hawaii to teach NLP. His name was Martin Carruthers, and he was originally a nuclear physicist, and a part of his work was to teach people some things about physics. While doing that, he noticed that many people had emotional obstacles to learning physics, and he got curious about resolving those obstacles. That led him first to methods of accelerated learning, then to hypnosis, then to NLP, and he became a trainer of all of those methods. Some parts of those methods are also incorporated in our work, especially in Module 2 and 7. Martin was still not quite pleased with all of that. He still felt something was missing. Anyway, he was invited to Hawaii to teach, and while being there, got a chance to observe a Hawaiian healer at work. He got quite curious and a little frustrated, seeing how some approaches that didn't quite make sense to him got wonderful results. He decided to learn and explore as much as he could about how and why it actually works. Martin didn't believe in magic, but he was open to experimenting and figuring things out. During most of the 80s and early 90s, he spent almost half of each year in Hawaii, learning the methods of 7 different kahunas. Step by step, he was making logical sense of their methods, translating them into what we would consider modern psychology. Later, he started shaping his own method based on everything he had learned by then, and cooperating with some other therapists, primarily Annegret Halansi in Germany. He credits especially the module 4 and 6 of our method to his cooperation with Annegret Halansi. As for me, I was learning everything I could about psychology since I was 14, 15 years old. I also explored a lot of alternative therapies while I was a student, but similarly to Martin, I always felt something was missing. I was looking for something that goes to the core of problems, rather than just quick solutions that, in my experience, don't work in the long run. So in the year 2001, I enrolled in one of Martin's first full trainings, and the more I learned during the training, the more I felt that I finally found what I was looking for. This method appealed to me because it went deep. It looked straight into what most other approaches avoided, and found not only awareness but also very creative and versatile solutions. I also like that the method is very flexible and adaptable. It's not a rigid structure that we try to fit every client into, but we have a range of approaches to adapt to different types of clients and situations. We also never find our own solutions for the client. We guide them to the place where they can find their own solutions. So we make the client more and more independent rather than dependent of us, which I think any ethical method should do. I've been coaching people since 2004, and I taught together with Martin for about 12 years. I also added to the method some new strategies I came up with when working with some particularly tricky cases. I will give you a lot of structure, a lot of explanations and details, and of course a lot of practical demonstrations, so you'll get all of my knowledge in what is now about 20 years of successful practice and 10 more years of learning even before that. So if you are ready to join our training, it's a bit like searching for hidden treasure on Hawaii, except you'll find the treasure inside. I hope we'll see each other soon in training, and until then, be well.